fortunate to have two people here that just blow me away. As you may know, May in the Startup Grind global community is Female Leaders and Women in Entrepreneurship Month in the global organization. We are holding 400 different events focused exclusively on females and women and what they're going through as entrepreneurs. And with that, I would like to introduce our fireside chat guest, Anna Elhini. Come on up. I'm going to keep the introduction really brief because we're going to get into a lot of it during the chat. But Anna, together with her husband and partner, Sam Elhini, where's Sam? There you are. Co-founded Creatrix back in, their company is Creatrix back in 2006. Sammy is the president and CEO, if I'm not mistaken. And Anna is the chief operating officer. And Creatrix, named for Anna as the woman who creates, is an identity management company specializing in systems integration and software engineering with expertise in biometrics, vetting, credentialing, and case management. Anna is responsible for all of Creatrix's corporate operations, business development, leveraging her 20 years of experience in operations, project management, contract management, and statistics. She holds a master's degree in measurement and quantitative methods and is a Phi Beta Kappa summa cum laude graduate of Emory University. And what is so special about Anna is A, she's a fellow Big Ten member and a graduate of Michigan State University, okay? And B, come to find out, Anna and I grew up in Ohio about a half an hour from one another, along with one of my team members, Ellen Stokes, who also grew up in Ohio. So it's kind of special. So Anna, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I may not need a microphone either, from what I've been told, but I'll turn it on just in case. Okay, there we go. Thank you so much for having me tonight. I appreciate it.
Okay, you and I grew up small town Ohio. Tell us about growing up there. What was it like? What experiences did you have growing up that may have led you to where you are today?
Okay, I think it's probably the best way to start is to tell you a little bit about my family. I always, this is going to sound negative, I don't mean it to, but Freud said we spend our entire life cleaning up the debris of childhood. And so whether that can be funny, and for some people that can be not so funny, I think it's important to know that where we come from. And for me, I do think my family shaped me quite a bit. And sometimes when you're younger, you don't realize how much that shapes you until you start getting older and maybe going to therapy. So I do have to start a little bit with my parents. My mom was a good Catholic woman who grew up in Toledo, Ohio, city girl, only allowed to go 50 miles away from home to go to college. She goes 47 miles away from home to go to college. And afterwards, they needed teachers in Texas. And so she said, wow, this is my time to escape. I want to go. So this is 1960. So she moves to Texas, and they introduce her to a nice young Army officer, and they end up getting married months later. My mom is a good Catholic, as I said, has 5 children, pregnant with her 6th, and her husband was killed in Vietnam. So she moved back home to Toledo, Ohio to be near family. She happened to meet my father, who had lost a wife and had a daughter. So they got married, bringing together 6 kids from 2 very disparate kind of lives. And my father loved Maryland because he went to the Naval Academy. And so somehow ended up here. That's another story. And so they were married. My dad said the best place to raise 7 kids is on a farm. So we moved to a very, very small town in just south of Toledo, Ohio. And I remember when my husband and I were first together, I would tell him I'm from this really small town. It's out in the middle of nowhere. First time I take him back home, we're driving up from the Columbus airport, and he's looking around, he's like, you really weren't exaggerating, you really are from, And so that's kind of just to tell you a little bit. So, my mom had gone through this death of her first husband, and I have 7 older brothers and sisters. I'm the baby of 8. And then my dad, who was a naval officer and who had retired from the Navy, and then growing up on a farm in the middle of nowhere. So I think that kind of sets the background for how I was raised. Again, being the baby of 8, my mom was pretty much done with parenting by the time I came along. So I was allowed to do things that maybe other kids weren't allowed to do, which for me was okay because I was a decent kid, right? I'm sure I got into some trouble. But I was allowed to kind of make my own decisions and get up in the morning by myself, make myself breakfast, go to school. I didn't really need my mom. And I do have to give a shout out. One of my sisters is here tonight with her husband Scott, from also small town Ohio, but now live in Texas. So they were in town and they were gracious enough to stay an extra day to hear me talk. So as she says, I'm her baby sister. So she actually, given our age difference, was kind of like a mom to me too. So. But in any case, so that's kind of my family background. Growing up on a farm, I think when you, in small town, nowhere, little Ohio, if you will, you kind of wonder, what is my purpose here? What am I learning? I think for me, it was, everyone is important. You don't need to have a college degree to be successful. There were, people often think about farmers and you hear the stereotypes, but I'll tell you right now, the majority of farmers I know can go out and buy a $250,000 combine tomorrow. Right, so a lot of them have that money and that judgment that we have maybe on the East Coast about farmers or factory workers isn't always, true. So I think that, realizing that there are good people everywhere, salt of the earth, I still use that term, people. I'm not really sure what else. I moved from, so my mom was sick of the winters in Florida, and so we moved sick of the winters in Ohio, so we moved to Florida when I was 14. So I got to kind of experience the beach life in Florida for high school, which was great. And that also taught me a lot because down there we were in an area where it was mostly snowbirds and elderly. And so my mom was by far the youngest person on our street. And then, here she's bringing a 14-year-old kid with her. So I really got a nice sense of, the older population in that, and I waitressed through college and grad school in Florida, and so that was a whole other education in of itself, waitressing. And it was something I would never give up. I loved it actually, but it taught me a lot, how to deal with people. Luckily, I never had any horrible experiences or bad tippers or anything, so I was blessed with that. But just being able to deal with all types of people, both growing up in Ohio and then waitressing and things like that. So that's kind of my background in childhood and things like that. So, a resilient mother who taught me women can do anything and, make sure you have your own toolbox and those kinds of, although now I just set myself up to do it. But, be able to do those kinds of things. And, for some part I was an only child, and for some I was this baby of 8. So I have the best of both worlds in that. I was lucky that I got to see, my sisters go to college and get jobs and, see that kind of, women in the workforce, and some chose after college to get married and have kids. And so I, saw both of that. And, my mom never, even though she was a teacher, never really went back into the workforce after having children. She worked pro bono a lot for helping disabled children in public schools and things like that. But it was really my sister who I saw going to the workforce and wearing makeup and heels and, all that kind of stuff that, I didn't really see my mom do. So she was very influential in that as well. And being a mom, being a working mother as well. So.
Okay, so you are married, you have a partner, the two of you have a thriving business. It's been going since 2006. You have a family. You are incredibly actively involved in the entrepreneurship, small business development community in this region. And you and I met a long time ago back at Howard Tech Council and the Maryland Center for Entrepreneurship. How do you and Sam keep it all together? How do you manage your time? Because as we all know, being entrepreneurs, it's very, very easy to let work consume our lives. And the big difficulty, at least as far as I know, with female entrepreneurs in particular, is that if there are children, in essence, you have 2 full-time jobs. Tell me how you and Sam have kind of structured your lives around the startup, being as actively involved in the community as you are, finding time to be able to create, and I hate the word balance, but to be able to negotiate between work and life and create opportunities for you guys to do things outside of family and work.
Right. So, I had started my career after grad school here in Columbia. I came here for a job and ended up making Maryland my home, not only because I found my husband, but my friends, my colleagues. And so when Sammy and I met, we happened to be working at the same company, although we kept it under the wraps for a little bit. And we were both very dedicated employees in that, if we had dinner scheduled and we got called in or we had emails to write, we both understood that, work is a priority. This is what pays the bills and things like that. So, I often say that work-life balance, especially as you own your own company, it's really one. It's just balancing your life, right? But even back then, we understood that we took our work very seriously, and we respected that about each other. And so that has carried over now that, we are really a mom and pop shop. And just to go back and tell you a little bit about how I got into this is really, I wasn't the type of woman to go and say, I want to start my own company. I was more of an academic, honestly, a 4.0, a little perfectionist, which I've had to learn not to be. And so for me, I think innately the risk of starting my own company was too much. And I think if I can inspire females and women to say, hey, look, take that risk. And for me, it was my husband, Sammy, who kicked me in the butt, literally, not who said, you can do this, right? I had worked for a company here in Columbia for a very short stint. It just wasn't a fit for me. And so I was kind of reevaluating my life. I thought, maybe I'll bake cakes and, do something else and just start up yoga. And I wasn't really sure if I wanted a couple months off of the workforce. And so Sammy, and although we had founded the company together, he was really the company at the time. And he said, come, you have so many skills and so much talent. Come over. But I'm not a business. I didn't think of myself as a business person. I was a statistician and researcher and things like that. And he said, Anna, just do it. Come over and let me, I'll help you to some degree. And as any of you who are married know that sometimes that's a daunting thing of my husband's going to teach me how to do something. So I value him. He's very good at what he does, but sometimes you don't want to hear from your husband how to do something, right? Like how to do the books and what this means. And so I do have to give 90% of my success to him in that he really did show me that, hey, look, you are so talented and so wonderful. You can get out there and do things. And you may not, I'm not a Java programmer, but I can do business development for what we do. I can do accounting, and he said I had taken an accounting class, which I did. And so I learned a lot. And I did take some programming classes to kind of learn the basics, but he was a very good business person who kind of taught me the ropes. And really innately to be a successful, even not so much academic, but to be a successful businesswoman, whether I'm working for other people, you are, in a sense, an entrepreneur yourself because you're selling yourself, you're branding yourself to be successful. And so in that's kind of how I got here. And it wouldn't be for, if it were not for him, I wouldn't be where I am today. I may be a successful, what have you, somewhere else, but I don't think I would be working for my own company. And so in that, if I can inspire any women, take the leap and do it. Whether you have a husband or a friend or significant other or whomever it may be kicking you, telling you to get out there and do it. But if you could do it yourself. So, and it's not something I regret. I'm glad I've had that experience so I can tell other people that, it may be difficult, but you can do it. So I'm very thankful for that. And he still teaches me a lot, right? And I'm thankful for that as well. So work-life balance. So we knew that about each other, that we were very responsive to work. I have girlfriends who say, I have yoga tonight, I'm not staying late. That's fine. That is your choice. I was never that type of person, and he knew that. And that doesn't make me any worse or any less or any better or anything like that. We all have our priorities in life. But for us, work was always a priority. And so we said, why don't we translate this into working for ourselves, right? Because that's always kind of the ideal situation. And you get to a certain point where certain bosses, they'll suck the life out of you, right? I've been very fortunate in my career that I've had some very good bosses, managers, mentors, who have really shaped who I am, taught me a lot. And most of them happen to be men. I do think that, I look at women's events and they're often filled with women, but I also really want to see men there too, because men have not only do you have daughters maybe, but you have females on your staff that you are actually influencing to such a degree. You may not know it, but you are. And so I always go back to, this isn't a female versus male thing, because we can all help each other and rise to, just like I can mentor men, right? I shouldn't be able not to mentor men, just like men can mentor women. And so in that, I'll be honest, we don't really have a work-life balance. And that sounds horrible, but it's more that we understand that, and we work for the government too, so that mission comes first when you work for the government, right? We work for DHS, TSA, so in that we're, protecting, the US in what we do. So of course you have that. But secondly, we also have employees. They come first too, right? They're our family and things, so we don't really look at it as kind of work-life balance. People say, aren't you on vacation? Well, yeah, but we own our own company. So most of you know, and that's okay. If some people do own their own company and they say, I'm taking this full week, that's okay. By no means am I judging them. It's just not how we do our lives. And it's funny, because most of you know that we're finally, after a long road, having our first baby in September, and a little girl. So I had a colleague of mine say, oh, you're gonna love being on maternity leave in the fall. And the maternity leave, what are you talking about? Like, I own my own company. And so again, it's that flexibility though, when you do own your own company. I've been very tired. Now, we're going into we're almost the third trimester, but I've been very tired, and so I am very fortunate that I can say, I need to go home and take a nap. So in that, when you own your own company, sometimes you can do that. But we don't, at least for us, we don't really get that total work-life separation. But we're okay with that. That we knew that going into our relationship, our marriage, our business, and it's worked for us. There's times when he has to miss events. I'm looking at Jeff of the chamber, so I was honored with the board of directors of the Howard County Chamber, and we had a luncheon last Wednesday. Of course I want Sam there, Sammy there, and a little crisis at work came up, and the mission came first, right? So we couldn't make it, and we understand that about each other, right? I'm glad he's able to be here tonight, but it's just something you deal with when you own a company together. And I will say that, some of my friends, girlfriends, colleagues say, I couldn't imagine working with my husband all day. I said that too, back in the day. What? Can't you be in the basement and I be in the... But we actually share our office space together. We're about 5 feet from each other, but we like each other, right? Not only do I love him, he's my husband, but we like each other as people. We like to be around each other. Sure, like every couple, or he may do something, he didn't take out the trash right, or he didn't put the food away, whatever. But you just learn to get over it. And so we spend almost an entire day together. And somehow we make it work. Again, therapy may have helped a little bit in the past, but. And so I think it is not for the weary getting into a company with your spouse where you're working together so closely. I do think you need to be best friends. You also need to be on the same page about, I would say this about marriage too, but especially in business, money, how you treat employees, your ethical nature, all of those things you have to be on the same page with, because if you're not, that's going to cause huge discord. In any working relationship, you hear about, and there's actually a few women entrepreneurs here in Howard County who will tell you stories about how they got into business with the wrong people. They ended up skimming books. They ended up doing these unethical, illegal things, and it's one of those things you have to vet everyone you come into contact with. Let alone getting married and starting a business with them, but even the people you do business with, lawyers, accountants, all of those things. I mean, we've had our share of, you know, certain service providers that we've had to let go because I don't find them to be ethical. Or, you know, they're just not on the same page, right? And so I think that's a big thing. And again, going back to, you know, the stereotypical woman, oh, you can't say something. I don't have a problem. If you're doing something illegal or unethical, no longer. No. You're out of my, you know, life. I may be nice to you, but no. You're not going to be involved in my business or my life.
If I could.
Sure.
Because you raised several things. Number one is you come from a background of basically a mathematician, a statistician, quantitative methods. You have worked for some very big organizations, i.e. Arbitron and ABT, SRBI, in the role of analysis. You mentioned that you had male mentors. My sense is that it was probably I don't want to say a male-dominated world, but a lot of men. What kinds of things did you run up against in a large corporation, and how did you deal with that as a female manager, leader, scientist, etc.? Did your mentors help you through that? Can you give us just a 30-second view of that?
Sure, I don't know if I can do 30 seconds, but, so I have to go back and I really have to say, so I'll be 43 this year, so I grew up in a time where it wasn't quite like my mom's time or even my sister's time, but there was still, you know, you would hear about misogyny and anti-women sentiments and, you know, things like that. I really have never, that I know of, experienced any of that, except in my grad school program. So you think academics is free of this? No, I experienced more of it in academics than I have ever experienced it in the business world. And so in that, now some people say, well, Anna, knowing your personality, no one's going to tell you to, you know, whatever. And so that could be too. Again, I am a believer that no one makes you feel inferior but yourself. And, you know, someone can come up and belittle you and do horrible things and say horrible things to you, but you know what? You have to walk away and say, that's not, you know, I'm not going to make myself feel that way. Should you take advice from people, especially people you admire who are, you know, respected in the community, whether that's in your church, synagogue, business world, what have you? Sure. I mean, you should accept advice from people. But there are times when it's you know, you're like, okay, thanks. And so I have to say that, yes, of course, my male mentors and my female mentors too. And at some of those companies, it was a lot of females, you know, or women. But yes, it was always kind of the men, and I don't know if we were at an age where it was kind of like a dad-daughter, maybe. I don't know if that's okay to say, but, and so they were always big proponents of me. And so I was always very thankful for that. You know, I also was a very hard worker. I tend to pick things up quickly, you know, things like that, you know, so, you know, you kind of, especially back in the day, you know, oh yeah, I'll stay till 8, you know. So I think that also helped, and I'm not advising all people to do that. But I also enjoyed going to work, right? So, you know, right out of grad school, I was so eager to go to work and have colleagues and wear the suits, and which I didn't realize that, you know, you don't want to do that, right? Casual khakis and things. But when I first started, you know, I was 24, right out of grad school, I'm wearing suits, heels, and all that. And so, but I do have to say that I really have not experienced those hardships, if you will, that a lot of women experience. And I'm very thankful for that. And again, I think that we're the organization, one reason is the organizations I work for, they didn't put up with that. Both Arbitron, Nielsen, and some of the large research firms outside DC. And so of course I don't put up, you know, I would never do that either. And then secondly, you know, there is something to be said about sometimes being an outspoken person, but also learning there are certain times you can't fight the battle, to be honest. You know, I have friends who horrible things have happened to them, and it is because of their gender or maybe their age too. That it's a hard battle, and sometimes you just, in my advice, just have to get out and move on, and it's not always worth the fight. So, but again, luckily I've never been in that. And if we're having a little girl, so as much as we all talk about spirited little children, as much as they can be a pain in the it's I think it's good. I mean, to have a spirited child that you can't talk to strangers. I don't have a problem with my child talking to strangers because I don't want them to be shy to even say no, stop, right? You can say hi, but you can also say, hey, get away from me. And so I think the same thing is true if we can try to empower women to say, no, that's unacceptable. And there are times, and I think when we were talking about, preparing for this, growing up, I think the way I did in Ohio, I have 3 brothers and older brothers who maybe were a bit irreverent. That's a good word to say. I'm not as sensitive, maybe as I should be. And so I'm sure growing up I heard things that were anti-woman or anti-women in workforce or, things like that. But I never took that personally. But it was interesting, just a couple months ago, I was actually at an event here in Maryland it was a cybersecurity event. Very top level guy was the keynote, and he kept using the phrase long in the beard. And it was really irking me, and it was funny because I guarantee at 14 or 15 I wouldn't have thought anything about long in the beard. But if you think about it, what does that tell a 14 or 15-year-old young lady sitting in the audience? Well, I don't grow a beard, right? I mean, so who is this? Are you only talking about men that are able to succeed? So it was an interesting perspective. Now again, at 14 or 15, I probably wouldn't have whatever. But I do think we need to be more careful about the terms that we use, both as men and women. And again, not being overly sensitive, I think we've kind of maybe shifted the pendulum a little too much in that, oh my gosh, we can't even say, that's a nice shirt or what have you. That's not what I mean. But there are certain terms that we can maybe avoid to make sure that our daughters and young females and things like that aren't going, what does he mean by long at the beard? And then I have to, and even if it's subconscious, it may not even be conscious that you're realizing that, oh, he's only talking about men, but what is that saying? Again, going back to, so I was actually an English major as an undergrad that then switched to stats. So I'm one of those weird folks. And I will say, and I talked to my husband about this too, because he always says you should be an engineer. Should have been an engineer like your dad and me. And I look back now and I wonder why. Why did I choose to be an English major? It was because I loved it, but then why did I choose to get a master's in stats? Again, much more employable, right? Want that job instead of staying in school. But I do think why I'm such a proponent of women in the STEM, science, tech, engineering, math, is because when you are judged on your tests or things like that, there's no subjection here. It's not subjective. You either get it right. I mean, 2 + 2 is 4, right? So you are never going to be at the whim of somebody dissing you, literally, because you're a woman. So if you can prove yourself in the science, tech, engineering, and math, you've proven yourself, right? And so that's where I always say, no one can take that away from you. You always, if you get a 95, and I was always a curve breaker, to much my husband's dismay. And so I loved that about, I always wanted to break the curve. Oh, no one's got me, And so for me, that was exciting and fun, right? But I do agree that you can't really do that a lot in the soft sciences, or the soft, the liberal arts. And again, I'm a proponent of liberal arts too. And so again, I think as women, no one can take that away. Yeah, I did. I got a 3.8 as an electrical engineer from Virginia Tech, or whatever it may be. Wow, okay. There shouldn't be any question that you can do what you can do. And so I think for women, that's an important part that no one can question, what your skill set is when you go into that. So I think it makes it a little bit easier. I don't know if that's true. That's just my perception. If you can maybe have a degree like that more so than high English major like me, right? So does that kind of answer your question about my path as a woman through?
Okay.
Okay. After it was a long 30 seconds.
You raised some very interesting points about the fact that whether it's men or women, one of the things that I have found, and when I work with clients or with, if I'm an advisor to somebody, one of the things that I find is we are all fearful. We are all afraid of something. And as a result, maybe we don't have the level of self-confidence that we otherwise do. I developed a motto that, you were talking about, well, what, people think of you, that's their, business. And I have a motto, and that is, what you think of me is none of my business, and it's your problem. But tell us about some of your failures, some of the things that you have struggled with. And I don't like to use the word failure, because to me, failure simply means you've chosen to walk off the field of battle and quit. I prefer to use Thomas Edison. I just found another way that it didn't work. But the kinds of struggles, the kinds of challenges, the problems, the issues, the fears, etc., that you have experienced, and that you and Sam and in the company have experienced, and how have you dealt with that and gotten over those challenges?
I think just in the whole scheme of my life and person that I am, I was always a perfectionist, and that does not serve you well in life. It served me well in getting a full ride to a very good university, things like that, but it did not serve me well in dealing with real life, because perfection is not real life. And if I can try to tell anybody that, and I think maybe that goes back to why I never started my own company or took that risk, because I was so fearful of failure. I was always that 4.0 student. This is where, I have friends who are still in academics, professors and researchers and things. And so it's a different ballgame. And I had to learn what it's like coming, because I was really an academic, right? Coming from that world into a business world where you don't get every grant, you don't get every, bid that you bid or, program that you bid on. You may not get every employee that you want. They may choose to go somewhere else. And also that, here's my husband pushing me to do something that's new to me. I'm a statistician, like totally different world. You think numbers, it's not the same. And so if it were, I'd be making a lot more money, right? Because you could, project different things and maybe not do the P&L all that well. But, and so in that, I think if I can tell anybody, you want to do well in life, you want to do your best, but sometimes that's not perfection. And I go back to, I learned this not too long ago, it's probably been about 10 years, about, has anybody ever heard the term, the Persians Law? And it's every Persian rug that's made always has a flaw in it, and that's because only God is perfect. And whether you're a religious person or not, right? So I kind of always live by that, no one is perfect. We all have our weaknesses. And so again, I think there's good and bad to every personality trait, every business trait that you have. And so perfection can be a good thing in certain times, but ultimately it caused me a lot of grief in learning how to be a good business person. And now I realize you don't have to be perfect in everything. I'm looking at the lawyers. Yes, you do have to be perfect in certain things. In my paperwork for the IRS and all that. But in terms of just general, and I think a lot of women, I see it, a lot of young women, we stress out about being perfect. And that doesn't mean always in the looks, the stereotypical looks and dress, but even in school, right? Now I always say I'm very thankful that I was kind of a perfectionist again, because I, was a scholarship kid. But when you're trying to do a business, you have to realize that things are going to set you back. I think I also learned, like I said before, there's some battles you just can't fight. My husband lived through this with me during I call it my professional midlife crisis, with a particular company I was with. It just wasn't a fit. And I tried to fight a battle, and I should have known, right? But I tried. It wasn't that great. But if I didn't have that, I wouldn't be where I am today. And that's where he said, you can bake cakes on the side, but you got to come over to, you have, and maybe one day I'll be baking cakes and doing my decoration.
I'm 5% of her success.
Oh,
It was all in there. Okay.
But so if I didn't have him kicking me and saying, "You can do this," what are you talking about? Like, why don't you think you can do this? That I wouldn't be here today. So again, if I wouldn't have had it was really a professional failure, right? Because I really made a stupid decision and tried to fight something that I knew I shouldn't have. So that was a failure on my part, but it led to where I am today. And we went from 3 people of our business, it was Sammy and a couple other people, it was just, I just kind of want to work for myself as a government contractor, to where we are today, 4 times the revenue and things like that. And so those are kind of my personal, growth in a professional way.
One of the things that, when I started the process of applying for this chapter, one of the things that the application process asks is to put together a business case for why you want a chapter, wherever it is. And I had to step back and I had to look at this region. There was a chapter in DC, and there was a chapter, or is a chapter, I'm sorry, there is a chapter in DC, there is a chapter in Baltimore. And the question I kept getting is, why put a chapter in Columbia? And I stepped back and I looked at the Mid-Maryland region. And when I began to crunch the numbers, I said, wait a minute, what's wrong with this picture? We sit in a region, we have 3 to 4 times the raw talent, natural resources, and financial capacity that Silicon Valley had 10 years ago. But the thing I find day in and day out is, unfortunately, we as a region can't get out of our own way and let the good things happen. Do you see that? What are you seeing, A, from Creatrix's perspective, as a management team, as a female leader and entrepreneur? What do you want to call it, the hairy armpits that we have as a region that needs to
And
change?
women and men can have those, right?
Yes. Yeah. Good. I was not being sexist when I said that. But I see a lot of power struggles, siloing, ego-driven. Me. I want 100% of a very small pie. When in fact, in my humble opinion, if we were to step back and look at what we're doing tonight, helping one another, we can grow a huge pie and everybody can get sick eating. What are you seeing from your perspective, from you and Sandy, from a company perspective?
I think that's true. I do think there are a lot of, especially small companies, that kind of come out and they just want to make a quick buck. And those are not companies we really care to deal with. We want to be here for the long haul. We believe in generating our people and our success. And sometimes that doesn't mean always going after every prime contract, right? Sometimes it might be okay to be a sub on 5 different things, and maybe only prime on 1, because you're keeping yourself small. And now granted, as business owners, yeah, the goal is to make money and to have a better life and to do a conscious capitalism, if you will, give back to our communities and families. But there's times when if you grow so quickly or grow so fast that you lose sight of who you are and your ethics and your morals and how you treat people. And so I think Sammy and I have a very clear vision in that, sure, would we love to land a $35 million prime contract? Yes, I'm not at all saying that. But we also have to say, wow, we'd have to change we'd have to make sure we can find people like us to help us run the company. And we don't want to let even our 14 or 15 employees down like that if we can't find the people like us. And so in that, we have stayed somewhat small. We are 100% revenue driven by our services right now. And we are, developing our biometrics products and hopeful to sell those. So that will also change, our tactical approach to our business as well once that product starts going out. But I do think in terms of Maryland, I think Governor Hogan has done a great job in terms of small business, in promoting small business. He himself was a small businessman, promoting small business, trying to get some tax breaks for us, and things like that, bringing back companies to Maryland, keeping, the McCormick, Spice Company and, things like that. And so having whatever, I'm not talking politics, his political party aside, What he has done is actually kept business here in Maryland, and he has promoted business in Maryland, and for a small business like us, that's a great thing. Do we also have organizations, Startup Grind, HTC, Howard Tech Council, all of those are such one, you go to other parts of the country, they don't have those. We have thought about maybe expanding to other parts. They don't have, even in big cities, they have a chamber of commerce, but they don't have these kinds of organizations that the Howard County, or Central Maryland has. Granted, a lot of it is driven by the Fort and NSA with AFCIA and Fort Meade Alliance and IEEE events and things like that. But I think born out of that has been this Howard Tech Council and the Incubator and Maryland Center for Entrepreneurship. So in that way, I think we're very friendly to small businesses. If we could just reduce taxes a little bit more, be a little happier. But and I think Columbia proper or Howard County is a great place. I think when you deal with people who are just out to get the money, that's just another personality that and business-wise or just in a personal life, those are just people you have to, and businesses you have to deal with. If you want to associate with them, that's your choice, depending on their morals and ethics and business strategies. And then there's some where you have to say, I don't want to be your friend. I don't mean to be, but again, I do believe in, I look back to my mom would always say, you have to be careful who your friends are, right? The same is true in business. You have to be careful who you do business with and who you bring into your circle. And again, this is where Sammy and I are very much in agreement, of certain people where we see certain behaviors and it's not somebody we want to work with. So in that, I can't imagine an area that is quite like ours. And, we still have that kind of homegrown feel here, which I like about Howard County. We're not really a big city, but yet we're deep, and we're not DC by any means, and we're not Baltimore, but I like it. I like the kind of homegrown. Most people here are very nice, like you said about the being altruistic and your networking. I think is always good. I've never shied away from introducing people, right? And then most of you out there in the audience, I've introduced people to, right? And I belong to a networking group where you were only allowed to. So let's say there was already one realtor in that networking group. You could never bring another realtor in. To me, personally and professionally, I love competition. Bring them all in, right? Like you said, there's a piece for everybody. Somebody might specialize in split foyer homes. Somebody might specialize in single family and other people. So to me, I've never seen that. I say bring them all together, just like at our parties. You'll see everybody and anybody. Everybody comes, right? And we're kind of the same way with our business strategy too. And so that's how we operate, that there's no, competition isn't a bad thing, and friendly competition is a great thing, right? If I can get something cheaper and from the guy down, I may go with him, right? Even though you're my really good friend, they may become my really good friend too. So it just depends, as long as you, to me, work with people who are like-minded and ethical and, and then I do try to support, local business and women-owned business, but sometimes you can't, they may not be ones I want to work with, so I'm not going to work with somebody just because they're not a woman-owned business. So.
Can we take some questions from the audience?
Sure. Only if I like them? No.
Okay. Floor is open. Any questions from anybody?
Okay.
Yeah, we would like to know when we can get one of those cakes that you keep talking about.
I did about 5 of them, and then now, so we have our house, the man who owned it actually rented out his basement after he got divorced, and so there's a full kitchen down there, so that's my baking kitchen. And Sammy will always say, when are you getting rid of all that stuff, because you haven't touched it in 3 years. But I figured, well, we have a daughter coming, I'm gonna make cupcakes for her class. Then I learned you can't make cupcakes for a kid's class, you have to go buy them. So I guess, but maybe one day I'll bring one in.
That would be great.
Yes.
Well, with your background in statistics and all, does your company use production statistics for each staff member? And if so, to what degree do you empower that staff member's ownership of his own statistics or her own statistics?
Right. So actually, we don't. I don't really use statistics on my people or on our staff. Because we're government contractors and we're subs right now to larger. I work closely with the PMO there in order to, develop our staff and team members. And so I do get updates on all of them. We believe in training and things like that. But in terms of actual statistics or analysis on employees, we don't quite do that. Does that answer? Yeah. And again, I think, you know, in our business, being as small as we are, it's probably not needed. I mean, I think, and actually I have one of our staff members or team members is here, Ryan Shepard. So I don't know, I mean, I don't run stats on you, so.
But if she did, they'd look awesome.
Yeah, they would. So I think, you know, we just try to have a really open relationship with our, you know, folks that work for us, and, you know, we consider it really a partnership, in, you know, with our employees or team or staff, whatever you wanna call, but, in that, you know, it's not, and I've always said this too, I'm not the only one imparting knowledge to people, right? Because I'm your boss or owner of the company or manager or what have you. I'm there because I want to learn from you too, right? I want to be a better person, and you can't be a good manager unless you've been around all different types of people and had different staff members. And I'll be honest, I was probably not the best manager at 25, right? Coming out of academics too, because out of that, everyone's like you in academic, right? Everyone's that 4.0 student, everybody's writing their senior thesis, everybody's like you. When you get into the workforce, that's not true, right? So I've had to learn that you can still be an amazing employee and somebody I want on my team, and you might not have been that. I mean, see, I didn't have 4.0, I was an engineer, did tech, I didn't have 4.0, but, I mean, so it's hard, you know, so that was a life lesson for me in that, you know, coming out, and here I got promoted to manager very, very young, and, you know, half my staff were double my age, and it was hard for me to say, wow, wait, not everybody's like me, and that's okay. So that's another lesson I take. And you know what, some people never realize that, that's fine, go back to academic or where everybody's like you, that's okay, be successful there. But in terms of actually being a successful business person, I don't think you can be a successful business person unless you realize that it takes all kinds, all personalities, all types, you know, people who have all levels of ambition. Sometimes you just want that person who wants to come in, do their job for 4 hours and leave, because you don't know what's going on in their life, right? I once had an admin who had an MBA from one of the top schools, and I always wondered, why is she, because she was a mom, and she wanted to be at home with her kids, right? So she only wanted to work 6 hours a day. I get it. But when you're 24 coming right out of school, you're like, oh, why did you do that? And so I think that's a lesson that we can take too, that everyone has different circumstances in their life that make them, you know, choose to be who they are and what they're doing right now. And I think that makes you not only a better person, but a better business person.
Anna, thank you very,
Oh,
very much.
thank you.
I am running a company called PerdidoFido, and just to give you some background, if you're any Spanish speakers, Perdido in Spanish means lost, Fido in human means dog. You put it together, lost dog, PerdidoFido. I came up with PerdidoFido. It's a GPS activity and vital health tracking pet collar. We plan to integrate technology to track your pet's heart rate, temperature, and respiration, and then send those vitals to your veterinarian once a month for review to aid in early detection and prevention of disease. The idea was conceived here in Howard County when I was a student at Howard Community College, and I was fortunate enough to get into the Entrepreneurship Fellowship Group at University of Baltimore, and through a series of avenues decided, wow, this could really be something that started out as just kind of a class project, and now it's a reality, and I'm sitting here with you in front of you guys, very nervous to talk about it.
Now, part of your background is you have a strong love and education in veterinary science. Am I correct?
I do. I have a degree in veterinary science, and I was a vet tech for 5 years. Shout out to Pittsburgh people in the room. If any Yinzers are here, that's where I got my degree. So, yeah, any Yinzers. I've always loved animals, and any parent will be hard-pressed to tell you that there's probably always going to be a time where you sneak animals in. And from as far as I can remember, I snuck cats into the house and would try to be like, you know, put a sheet over it, and then my mom would be like, Mom, it's not moving, it's fine, there's nothing over there. And then you tell your mom, it's actually been here for 2 weeks, good job. And I've just always had a love for animals, and that translated to me pursuing a degree in animal technology and being a vet tech for 5 years, and then coming up with this and working with it.
So where is the company now? I mean, I'm gonna mention this because I gotta get it out of the way, and that is you won a $15,000 first prize at this competition. That's significant. I don't care how you cut, okay? Where's the company now? What are you struggling with? What are your challenges? What might we as a community do to help you?
Sure. So right now I'm working, pretty much signed up with who I feel is a really great partner to create a proof of concept and to get my hardware and software going. He's a wonderful, wonderful guy. He doesn't know I'm asking to work with him yet. We had a meeting and I told him I'd get back to him, but as soon as I had the meeting, I was just blown away by him. RPM Tech, Cyrus, he's amazing. So right now we're working on we're using the money to get our proof of concept. I have a veterinarian lined up that I actually go to with my dog, and basically once we get our prototypes built, we'll be able to do a beta test with some unfortunately overweight animals in his community. And basically the great thing about all this is that it's a big dream, it's a lofty goal. I had a meeting with a company who was like, cool, great, this is awesome. Do you have $1 million? And I'm like, cool, great, no I don't. So it was great because I realized I needed to scale down and kind of hone in on what I could achieve at this point. 56% of dogs and 60% of cats are overweight in the United States. And after talking to my veterinarian about that, he was like, look, there's a real need for something in animal health care that translates to people to get their pet in shape. It's easy for your pet to lose weight. It's hard for people to change the habits for their pet to lose weight. So right now we're working on our minimum viable product, which is an activity tracker, and it's app heavy. It gives you information on nutrition, different types of activity that you can pursue with your pet if you have mobility issues, excuse me. And it also connects you directly to your veterinarian. The whole point of my company is that we want to deepen the relationship between you, your pet, and your vet. They play an integral role, and unfortunately most of us only go once or twice a year. And that's if there's just for a wellness check or a problem, and we want to make sure that there's a deeper connection between your vet. They give you the inside goods on hey, your pet might not be feeling well, and you might not have noticed this because it's hard to notice things when you see them day in and day out.
Okay, so right now, what's your runway? What's your critical path? When do you feel you're going to have a minimum viable product ready to go to market?
I'm hoping that by fall we'll have a prototype out. It's very important to me. I understand pets aren't pets, they're your family members. And I understand that. I'm a helicopter mom to a beautiful pit bull, and I get it. So we don't really have a strict timeline. It's more about making sure it's right, that the things are working the way they should be working, that pet parents are happy with the way things are working, and that we're seeing results. And because that's so important to us, I'm not limiting ourselves to an actual physical deadline and timeline. It's all when we can finally say, this is working, and people feel comfortable with us, and they're happy with what we're putting out. And hopefully, once we start beta testing, I'll have a better answer for you on that.
If you need beta testers, all you need to do is come see us, and I'll make sure that we in the community help, okay?
Great.
All right, so right now, what are the biggest challenges that you have? Because, and I'm sorry, I should have mentioned this before. What we do is we feature a young local startup for the second half of our program. And I ask them to, share where they are, what's in the future, but more importantly, I ask them to come prepared and bring a problem, a challenge, an issue, a struggle that they're faced with real time today. And then we throw it out to the community and we do a crowdfunding problem-solving forum so that hopefully Kayleigh this evening will leave A, with a little more education, B, maybe some inspiration, or C, maybe a connection or two that will serve as resources to help her move to the next level in her entrepreneurial journey. So I'm asking you, what's the problem, challenge, fear, issue that you're facing right now that you would like to put on the table?
you had told me in advance to think about this, and I sat down, and at first I was like, oh man, I don't know. And then I started really thinking, and I was like, oh man, I can't, there's a list. I think two big problems that I'm currently trying to overcome. I have a degree in veterinary science. I can tell you anything about your pet's healthcare. I don't know anything about technology, about software design, hardware design. And it's hard when you have an idea for a company that's so heavy in those things. I have a clear vision of where I want it to go, where PerdidoFido will go, and a clear vision of what I want to provide. It's all a matter of getting from A to Z. So I think that connecting and building those relationships has so far proven to be beyond invaluable. I think that's problem number one. Problem number two, I'm a full-time student on academic scholarship. I work a part-time job in IT, even though I just said I don't know anything in IT. I hope my boss doesn't see this. And then all of my free time goes towards building PerdidoFido and building the framework. The best piece of advice that I ever got is, okay, you don't know how to build an app. Can you build a clickable PDF and show me what you want it to look like? So finding those alternatives and those avenues to try and convey the message so that I can find the right people to work with is kind of where I'm going with that. But it's difficult when you want to pursue something in technology. It's so fast paced and so fast moving, and you feel like you want to get out there with what you have. So I think that's definitely a difficulty in trying to take a step back and then realizing, yes, this is my baby, but it's not it's a good thing to ask for help. And I'm currently looking for another founding partner just to kind of help me take the lead on the tech side that I am not well versed in.
Okay, so I open it up to the floor. Questions, comments, thoughts that you might like to share with Kayleigh?
Well, did you make that clickable PDF?
I did.
Cool.
It didn't click the way I wanted to. In my crazy
Yeah, but that's entrepreneurship.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, this is something wrong with the laptop. This is really weird. Luckily, I was able to joke my way out of it. But I finally got it working, and it was great. It was a great tool because I think things get lost in translation. And it was the best piece of advice I got, and I was able to show who I'm working with. This is the feel. It's hard to convey what you want, what the feeling of your business should translate to in a visual. It's really difficult. So being able to make that clickable PDF and having it work was a really great tool for me to be able to convey the message of what we're trying to accomplish.
Cool.
Yes, say
So
it.
one thing, that we have a biometric product. It's portable, a fingerprint on it, get iris, stuff like that. So there's a lot of hardware and software there, And one thing that we look at is we do put deadlines on ourselves. Okay, so there are certain shows that we have to go to, and because people are watching, we need to show them something at each time. So I would say, at some point you need to say, I need to have something to show. And the one thing that I remind myself, and Anna reminds me of it too, is that it's better to have something somebody can complain about than to have something perfect that nobody ever gets their hands on.
Right.
Okay, so you have to remember that. So I don't want them to complain about it, but at least there's something to complain about. Otherwise, you've got this perfect thing that's way out there, and eventually, people will forget about it, right? But if there's this thing where they're, well, could you just do that? Well, they're asking you for something now, right? So they're continuously engaging. So I would encourage you to think about time frames and also keep your technical people to that, right? I'm a techie, and I want forever to do everything and make it perfect, but then I also, have to remind myself I can't do that. And she also reminds me that I can't do that, if you're looking for partners to help you with that, we would love to give you a hand there because we've had, I've been in some form of software engineering or other type of technology management for 20 years, and I can tell you it's very difficult, but you have a great idea, and you really, but you need to push it.
Yeah.
Okay, you need to push.
We're gonna talk.
So if I'm not mistaken, Sam, let me see if I can paraphrase, and that is that perfection in this case, or we as entrepreneurs, perfection is fatal to us. It's better to be good enough, get it out there, iterate, get the feedback, because that's the journey to perfection, not worrying about being perfect, then getting out there.
Voltaire, right? Didn't we say perfect is the enemy of good?
Yeah.
Think about that. Perfect is the enemy of good.
Yes, Lauren?
So the other thing I would say is if you can't make a clickable PDF, just draw it. Good old paper and pen, right? I mean, you just have to put something down to get your vision out there. And then the other thing I would say is try and find other platforms that you like their design and the way that you can navigate the system and the user journey, et cetera, and bring those to, go to a Starbucks and just get some people's thoughts. Buy somebody a cup of coffee and say, hey, what do you think of this, right? And you can get some really good feedback that way.
I actually, I don't know, I live in Baltimore City, but I go to Paw Point. It's a dog park in Roland Lake. And I'm pretty sure everybody's sick of me at this point because every time I'm like, oh, hey, Joe, by the way, this is what I'm working on. What do you think about this? And I at this point, at any point really, anything that anybody says to me is extremely important to me. And I make sure to remember every single thing because that clickable PDF, and I got it to work, and it's great. If I say so myself, it's pretty darn awesome. But that was said in passing to me. And if I hadn't have really been paying attention, I would have missed something that completely would have changed my approach to things. So I like what you said about talking to everybody and whether they like it or not.
Yeah.
I'm talking to them.
Yeah.
Andy?
I have a question. With the data that you're going to be gathering about various animals and passing out to veterinarians, I guess two questions I have are, is there anything that you were providing the veterinarian other than the data, as in an analysis of it, recommendations, past history and trends? And is there anything that also you could provide the users as well with said data? My thought process would be that would probably be something you would want to do now, but at least as you begin to accumulate data and as you continue to beta test, I would hope and wonder, are you gathering that data, keeping it, and finding ways to use it and analyze it for everybody in the future, basically.
Yeah, so the great thing about strengthening your relationship with your vet is that they already know you. They know your pet. You have an existing relationship with them. So we will have a pet portal that has all that information, but your veterinarian already knows you. This is more or less, I don't know if any of you guys, I know a few of you have pets. Like I said, I have a pit bull, and when I bring him to the vet, he's a psycho. And I just think to myself, I know they can get a heart rate, but it would be difficult with all the commotion to hear a murmur if it's like a stage 1 or stage 2. It'd be difficult to pick up on little intricacies that maybe if, how blood pressure patients, they're advised to wear cuffs all the time at home because it's a better way to get an idea of what your body is doing at any given moment. That's really what we're looking for are outliers. So, okay, your pet is at home sleeping, but its temperature all of a sudden has spiked. You don't think that there's anything wrong, your pet's just sleeping. These are the things that the veterinarian can look at and say, oh, okay, maybe there's something going on underneath physiologically that maybe isn't presenting itself yet. And they can say, hey, I'd like you to come in, I'd like to get this checked out before it becomes symptomatic, before it becomes an issue where you're forced to see your pet really sick and you have to do all the testing. What was the second part to your question?
Is there the idea of being able to provide, say, analysis and recommendations to the owners themselves as the data is being sent to the vet? Would similarly more user-focused or user-facing analysis of the data be presented to the user as well?
Absolutely. So it'd be sent to you, and you'd be able to log on, and the vision for this is that you'd be able to log on and you'd be able to see a snapshot of what's happening in your pet. You'd be able to see, okay, this is what Fido was like, or your cat. They don't really have a cat name like Fido. Whiskers, I like that. Okay, Whiskers. This is what Fido and Whiskers were doing yesterday. This is what they were a month ago. It would be able to detect patterns and be able to present those patterns to you. And then it would also be able to say, you'd also be able to say, okay, if you're using the activity tracker, say, and you don't have the vital health tracker, you'd be able to see the progress that they're making in weight loss, and if there's any kind of if they have hypertension or diabetes, what's the change in their glucose? What's the change in their heart rate? All those things are so important to you because I think that we need to be able to I think when you see something, it's just like when people lose weight. When you see yourself every single day, you don't really notice the small changes. And I think that that's the same with pets, and it can become discouraging. And that's exactly what we don't want. We want to encourage you, and we want to show you, even if it's a small step, that's a big step. You're doing something right. So we would definitely be incorporating that for the user to make it more user-focused, as well as offering an educational background so that they can look to see, like if you give your dog a small piece of cheese, do you understand that that's the equivalent of you taking 2 large pieces of cheese? There are things that people just don't understand and don't get, and I didn't get before I had my education. And so that's really what we want to do, is we want to teach people, we want to educate them, but in a really fun way, and in a way that you feel like you're doing something good for your pet, because you are.
Patrick.
I've got a couple of things. One, have you ever just strapped a Fitbit to your dog?
Okay, I did that, and I think that I picked the wrong name. My dog's name is Gunther, and it should have been Houdini because he destroyed it. He ripped it. We were at the dog park, and I was just so curious, and I put it on him, and I remember looking at him, I'm like, what the heck is that purple thing hanging out of his mouth? So yes, I did. Why were you asking? I'm just curious.
Well, as simple and silly as that sounds, I've developed a few packages and products that have gone to market well and so forth, and I've seen the product cycle and so forth. And I learned over the years what some of the people here were saying, which is I boiled it down to a 2-step process. Step 1, make it work.
Yeah.
Step 2, make it work better.
Yeah.
And then when I got to that make it work step, I realized from a marketing preparation viewpoint, what you're doing at the park is brilliant. If you picked one question that you went to the park and asked the same question the same way, with the same expression on your face to everybody you could, and that question wasn't so much some complex thing about what a vet would be interested in or a serious user would be interested in, but something like, if you could find out, if you could know the one thing your pet was experiencing, what would that be? Every single time, what would be the one thing you'd like to know about what your pet is experiencing? And whatever you get the majority of an answer, wrap your product design to make it work, step 1, around that. Because when you get ready to market, that's what's going to sell it in. And then even if it's stupid to you or stupid to the vets, people don't want to know that. No, the truth is, your survey proved they want to know that.
Absolutely.
And that's going to get your sales going, and then you come back and make it better.
Yeah, thank you. There is one question that I ask everybody, because I don't like to be like, hey, let me pester you. And it's funny because, I hope anybody that has pets, I encourage you to think about this tonight. I always ask everybody, if you could ask your pet, and if you could communicate with your pet, and you could ask them one question, what would you ask? And everybody's answer is dramatically different. I would be like, why are you a clinger? Why do you always have to touch me? Why don't you have any independence? But I think that I really like that, asking that question. And it is really interesting, the different answers you get from different people. And I find it, I wouldn't say I'm an analytical person necessarily by nature, but it's really interesting to think about backgrounds and areas that you've lived in and economics, and then to hear that answer and kind of think about, okay, that's interesting. There's a pattern between the people that answer this way and people that answer that way, which is really great because if you're doing that customer discovery, you're able to kind of hone in on what matters the most. So I really, thank you, I like that.
Yes.
I'm curious if, as part of this, you're also intending to translate some of this. I mean, clearly you have a lot of education. I and a lot of other people do not. So one concern one thing I'd be looking for is this a problem? And how big of a problem? Is this a correctable problem? Are we nearing the end? What have you? Something that would be easy for folks that don't understand the medical terminology.
Oh, sure. Everything in, just because you brought up medical terminology, would be in layman's, right? It's anything that your doctor, if you can sit down with your doctor, and hopefully you have a good one that's not just like talking over your head, but like explaining everything. The whole point of the company is fun. I mean, when you think about your dog and your cat, you don't think like, oh, what a pain. You think, oh, they're so fun. They bring so much to your life. And you want to do more for them. And we want to perpetuate that thought process. So everything that we would explain to you would be explained in different ways. If you play educational games, they'll have the same concept taught to you in like 3 different ways. And that's kind of what we want to pursue. We want to make sure that you are learning something without even realizing that you're learning something. The biggest thing is, and like you said, I think that it can become overwhelming, trying to get an education about your pet, and it can become kind of monotonous, the background information. So definitely something fun and interactive is what we're going for. Like I said, so that you don't even realize you're learning something. And then hopefully it becomes part of your normal talk where you're at coffee and you're like, oh, hey, girl. I just learned about heart rate and blood pressure and blah, blah, blah.
Yes, sir.
I get what you're trying to do. Is there also gonna be something on, is it gonna be a collar? Is it also gonna have something on in case the dog will get lost, that you can find it?
So after talking to everybody at the dog park, I realized people are crazy about their pet collars. I tried to steal one of my friend's Maryland flag collars and she freaked out. So to me, that was a clear-cut sign that people don't want collars. They want something that they can attach to a collar because that collar shows individuality, shows your personality. It's important to people. And far be it from me to try to move in on that. So it would be a small tracker that would go onto their collar. The plan is, we're working right now on the activity tracker. What I see for the company is ultimately creating more and more products. Okay, so you have the activity tracker to help your pet lose weight. Maybe you have a little bit more money and you'd like to spend that on having an activity tracker with GPS. Maybe you want to spend more money and have a GPS activity and vital health tracker. The whole point is that it needs to be accessible for everybody based on what their needs are, right? Because everybody's needs for their pets are completely different. So that's where, I hope that kind of answers your question, is where we're going with that.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention, I'm so sorry. One thing I forgot to mention that I'm really excited about is we have all this information, right? And you had asked a question about if it's going to be translated to users, if it's just to vets. One of our goals is to partner with veterinary institutions and ethically and anonymously sell them the information as far as your pet's breed, activity level. It has nothing to do with, they wouldn't know your name or anything like that. But basically, we would be aggregating this information. Why not send it to the people who are studying this information to further aid in education to create better products for our pets and to create better services? And that's kind of like a back-end revenue that I'm really excited about to get involved with.
Yeah, last question, Josh.
It's not really a question so much as a statement. That made me think about that we just moved to a new area, we have a new vet, we've heard some good things, we've heard some mixed things. And so I think that it would be a really great additional feature if you're going to share that information with other people to kind of get a verification that what the vet has identified as a problem is actually a problem.
Yeah.
By the way, I love pit bulls.
They're the best, aren't they? He's so
Kayleigh, I hope that this has proven valuable for you on whatever level, okay? Ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna wrap up. That kind of concludes this evening. I wanna thank you all for being here. I hope that you leave, my responsibility and my dream is that when you walk out that door, you will have left with a little more education, maybe some inspiration, but also connections and resources that you didn't have when you arrived so that you then have a chance to take that next step. If everybody can do that, then I will have fulfilled my job as a chapter director. If you don't do that, I need to know about it because that means I gotta change things. So, if you like what we do, if you would like to be part of the, our Startup Grind community, there are a number of ways that you can do it. Go out on the website, to our chapter website, you can sign up for our newsletter. You can also share what we do with your friends, your colleagues, etc. If they have any interest in what we do, they are more than welcome. So that having been said, Patrick?
And you can use the Treble network to do that as well.
And Treble, yes. And we are looking to completely revamp our entire communication system. So for those of you who are on our mailing list, look out because we've got some great stuff coming. That having been said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for coming. I wish you all a great evening.